And today, together with our guests, we will guide you to the future web. Just like you, I'm looking forward to hearing some insights from the IT specialists, the strategies they propose, the challenges they faced, and more importantly, I would like to know about their personal experience. During this session, we will have some hands-on applications and also personal experience provided to us by the presenter. But more information we will get from our first presenter, who is Daniel Appelquist, an open advocate at Telefonica. They will introduce us to the migration from HTTP to HTTPS and the rise of the HTTPS. Hello.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you. It's good to see some familiar faces, and thank you for. I'm honored and a little awed to be here in front of you. It's thank you, all of you who chose to come into the web track. I know it's not as sexy right now, maybe as big data and cloud, whatever those are. But I promise you, we have some good material in this track. So I'm going to jump right into it. First of all, I have 20 minutes, and I'm probably maybe going to take one question at the end. I'm probably only going to leave time for one question, but I'm going to be on the panel later as well. And so if you have other questions on the material I'm presenting, feel free to ask them during the panel, or indeed come up to me during one of the breaks or whatever. Okay, so my talk is the rise of HTTPS and other global geopolitical crises that I've been involved with. Who am I? Let's see my web-based slides. So first of all, I'm presenting from the web here. If you want to follow along, go to that URL, which is at the top of the screen, and which will be at the top of the next slide as well. And you'll be able to follow along on which slide I'm on. Also, a lot of these slides contain URLs because this is the web, and so if you want to find out, if you want to dig deeper into any of the material that I'm presenting, you can do that by following the slides that I have in the URLs in the slides. Okay, so first of all, woo, that works. Okay, so this is, by the way, this is a web-based presentation on slides using slides.com, and I'm using a web-based clicker here to advance the slides. So this all relies on the Wi-Fi, so if things get a bit dicey, I apologize for that. So who am I? I'm an American guy who lives in London, and I work for a Spanish company, which is Telefonica. I work in the Firefox OS group within Telefonica, so that's a team that's working with Mozilla on Firefox OS, and I have I'm not here to talk about Firefox OS, but I'm happy to talk to you at length about Firefox OS, and there's a Firefox booth in the back, indeed, where there are people that are there talking about Firefox OS as well. I'm very positive on it. I work on web standards, web developer advocacy. I represent Telefonica in the W3C, which is the standards group that is responsible for web standards. And within there, I co-chair a group called the Technical Architecture Group with Sir Tim Berners-Lee and a guy, Peter Linz from HP. And I'll talk about that more in a second. I have just started to become an advisor to the UK government on the use of open standards, and I tweeted Torgo, please follow me. So now let's see, can I advance the slide again? Yes or no? A little bit of a lag here. Okay, so this is the tag group that I'm involved with. I put this picture in here because very often you think about web standards, you think about a bunch of faceless people in some room. You don't know exactly who they are or what they do somewhere else besides not really relevant to what you work on. The tag is kind of a steering group for web standards in general, and we are trying to be super relevant to web developers. So we're doing a lot of our work on GitHub, and I'll show you some of that later. And we want to be very open and accessible. Again, follow us. You'll see our Twitter handle on at the end of the presentation as well. Follow us on Twitter and try and get involved maybe in some of our, in influencing some of our discussions. Okay, there we go. All right, so what I'm here to talk about is the rise of HTTPS. And for me, a lot of this discussion kicked off at a workshop which I hosted last year in London called STRINT, or Strengthening the Internet Against Pervasive Monitoring. And apologies, this presentation might get a little political, warning. Okay, so all the materials from the STRINT workshop are at that URL there. This is what it looked like. We had about 100 people in the room, hosted at Telefonica in London, between W3C standards people, IETF standards people, some of the kind of most senior people in web security in the whole industry. We had, you know, some of the inventors of HTTP, some of the inventors of SSL and TLS there, and the topic was really, you know, what can we do as the standards community, as the technical community, to combat against the threat of pervasive monitoring. And what do I talk about when I talk about pervasive monitoring? Pervasive monitoring, and this is a word-heavy slide, so apologies for that, but pervasive monitoring, just to throw a definition out there, is surveillance at widespread observation points, so across the internet, without any particular target in mind, but just kind of vacuuming up information across the web and across the internet. Surveillance without any modification or injection of network traffic. So it's not, in that sense, it's pervasive and passive monitoring, for the idea being that, whoever is doing the surveilling would use that information later. And so the IETF community and the community that was there for this workshop was unanimous in calling this an attack. And what do I mean by attack? It's attack in a kind of technical sense, because the internet is there for a purpose. It's there to take packets from one place and assemble them on the other end of that connection without anybody modifying them and without anybody having snooped them along the way. And that's kind of part of the purpose or the design of the system. So in that sense, pervasive monitoring is an attack on how the internet works. It's an attack on the trust level of the internet. So it's all about trust. The web is supporting more and more of the world's communication. If you think about it, we are constantly using the web for more and more vital applications and services that we encounter and that we work with throughout our daily lives. Finding a job, paying taxes, figuring out what school your children are going to go to, trying to research symptoms, how much money do you have in your bank account, investments, connecting with the communities. It's all happening over the web. And trustworthiness is really key to all of this. The idea here is that passive monitoring and passive monitoring undermines that trust. So looking back a little bit in time, we can realize that HTTPS was originally deployed, it was originally developed for one purpose. It was to make people feel comfortable about spending money online in the early web. It was needed in order so that people could put their credit card details in and feel confident that that information was going to be kept secret. That was at a time when maybe buying stuff over the web using your credit card or conducting online banking was one of the things, was maybe the only time when you really needed that level of trust on the internet. But now, almost, as I was talking about, almost all of your life is mediated somehow on the web and on the internet. And more of our communications, including private communications, including communications that we would expect to be personal, are happening on the web and on the internet. So it's all about trust, and more of what we do online requires that level of trust. Keeps blocking me here. All right, so let's see. Come on. So what has been the response? TLS, all of the things, right? That has been kind of the general response from the web community. And I promise there are a couple more memes in my talk as well. It's not just text. Okay. So there has been a tag finding. So what does the tag do? The tag, this technical architecture group that I co-chair, one of the things that we do is we produce findings. It sounds very important. It's really just an opinion of the people that are on that group. I should have mentioned, by the way, that it's an elected group, right? So it's elected by the members of the W3C. Great. One of the findings that the tag has produced is about moving the web to HTTPS. And this has created a lot of, response, a lot of unclarity, lack of clarity in the community, or a lot of objections. It's raised a lot of objections by web developers about, aren't there problems with moving to HTTPS? So I thought I'd put in here a couple of the commonly raised objections and why they're wrong. And I'll try and blow through these pretty quickly. So first of all, HTTPS is expensive and hard to set up. Okay, you need to buy a certificate, but not only that, you need to install that certificate, you need to maintain the certificate, you need to renew it when it goes out of date. You need to have staff who are responsible for maintaining that certificate and maintaining, everywhere where that certificate needs to be installed, all that kind of stuff. So yes, but this is getting better. And there's an effort called Let's Encrypt. Have people heard about Let's Encrypt? Anybody hear about Let's Encrypt? That's really good. I'm glad, because this is an exciting thing. You need to visit this website. It's all about a new certificate authority with free certificates, but not only that, they're working on this ACME protocol, which actually helps operations people to manage and make sure that the certificate is always up to date, that kind of thing. By the way, if you're looking for an area to innovate, and an area where there's a vacuum right now, it is in this space, right? If there's anything that we need more of, we need more companies that are innovating around how to provide certificates to people and how to manage that process. I think that's a huge area that needs some work right now. Okay, so next thing. There is no value in using HTTPS for public data like news articles. So why should I have to use HTTPS if I just go to my local newspaper website? Well, this kind of misses the point that aggregating browser data can actually reveal a lot about your behavior. It can reveal a lot about your likes and dislikes. In fact, people have been put in prison in certain countries because of what they've liked on Facebook, or what articles they've read, or what communities they've participated in. So this is a this idea is the cousin of the it's just metadata argument. And if you've been following the news around this, a lot of people like to tout this idea that, oh, it's just metadata, don't worry. Guess what? Metadata is data. There is no such thing as just metadata. The idea that it's just metadata is kind of newspeak, in my view. So 3, TLS is slow. Mostly not. Mostly there has been a lot of performance optimizations happen recently. There's a website which I urge you to visit called istlsfastyet.com. Spoiler, it is. By the way, HTTP 2 also mitigates some of the performance issues that are in HTTPS with the encryption. Okay, so TLS breaks feature X. That's another common objection. And this is a thorny one because it usually has to do with mixed content, right? So if you have a page that has both secure and insecure content in it, then the user is going to get a warning. Those warnings are nasty, and pretty much we don't want that kind of user experience, right? So this is still one of the things that needs a lot of work. There are tools like HTTPS everywhere that can really help you to debug this stuff, and there's some emerging standards that are going to help as well. The fifth one being HTTPS offers kind of a false sense of security because such and such because the CA authority is not secure because it has been undermined in XYZ cases. Well, yes, okay, sometimes there have been problems. There are problems with any system. But modern web security, which you know, is pretty darn good. And compared to what, right? So yes, there are holes, but it's better than the alternative, which is no encryption, really. So it's all about mitigating. It's not about solving the problem, but it's about mitigating the problem, which means making it more difficult for whoever is trying to monitor you passively without. It's also, I should point out, not about not catching the bad guys, right? So whoever the authority is still has the opportunity to actively target people, and we're not stopping that. And we don't say that we should stop it. Okay, so why should you care? Why should you care about this stuff? Because no good. Okay, all right. Well, that's kind of an emotional argument. You know, but I do believe in this idea that a secure internet is needed for freedom of expression. It's become a platform for freedom of expression. Freedom to communicate securely and privately is important for democracies and stuff, right? Nice to see you. So secure anonymous communication is especially important for whistleblowers. It's important for marginalized or oppressed groups. These are kind of edge cases that are extremely important when you talk about democracy. And blanket surveillance that is, you know, what I've described in terms of just hoovering up data and keeping it in some warehouse for future use, because sometime in the future you might do something wrong and we need to figure that out. That's arguably overreach, and it needs to be challenged, and it is being challenged, and we've seen some good stuff in the States recently where the courts have been successfully challenging pervasive monitoring and persistent storage. And by the way, there are actually more than one government, so even if you trust your own government and you're like, well, I haven't done anything wrong, well, who knows where you're going to be, right? You know, who knows whether you can trust your government in the future, and also who knows what other governments or what other authorities might be out there. Right, I'm not making this up. This is just one example of where it's been shown that GCHQ in the UK has been monitoring journalists, and you know, it just doesn't feel right. It feels like that shouldn't be something that the internet allows us to do. It's not only governments that we need to be worried about. I put some links in here. There's some interesting stuff, you know, relating to big data. How one woman tried to hide her pregnancy from big data. I strongly recommend reading that article. There's one thing I wanted to highlight here, which is that it's another challenge that HTTPS doesn't necessarily solve, but we are currently, the way that the internet ecosystem works with ads and tracking networks, Carnegie Mellon research has shown that when you explain to people how the web works with tracking cookies, they say, no, 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 that can't possibly be how it works. That would be illegal, right? And so the word on the street is, or the, you know, the kind of sentiment amongst web users, right, is that the way that the web works should actually be illegal. So we need to think about that, and we need to think about, you know, privacy on the web in general. One positive thing that I wanted to point out, the White House, US White House recently posted on GitHub a proposal to move all federal websites to HTTPS only, which is a positive move in exactly the right direction. And by the way, the tag plus won this. And I would just like to also point out, White House seeks comment on GitHub. That's pretty cool, okay, right there. So I don't normally like pump up governments, but I mean, I think this kind of thing should be pretty encouraged. Right, so the web needs to clean up its act on security and privacy, that's clear. Come on, what are we doing? There's work going on a security privacy self-review. That's a kind of checklist that the tag is working on for spec developers. I'm going to blow through these because I have like very little time left. There's something called opportunistic encryption, which is coming down at us, which is actually in the IETF, HTTP working group. And that means that you could establish an HTTP link. I go to an HTTP URL, but then actually under the covers, there's encryption going on opportunistically. It upgrades the connection to an encrypted connection. And that's very interesting work. It's a little controversial. By the way, that S might have been one of the web's greatest mistakes. That's certainly what Sir Tim thinks. He is of the opinion that we should have just designed the whole system so that the encryption happens without, under the covers, without you having to explicitly say HTTPS. Well, now it's too late to kind of fix that. But opportunistic encryption is one of the things that helps to get us there. Permissions API, this is something really interesting happening in W3C. By the way, a lot of these links you'll see are GitHub links, because a lot of the work that's happening in web standards these days is moving to GitHub. So permissions API allows you to programmatically figure out when a permission is being requested, such as if you make a geolocation request, you get a user permission. More and more APIs are requesting permission because more and more APIs are powerful. I wanted to highlight this permissions anti-pattern, by the way, on this, certain websites that you go to their web page and immediately it asks you a blind location request. Please do not do this. Never do this. This is an anti-pattern. Don't implement this. Okay, if you implemented this, leave the room. No. So ask permissions for a purpose. That's something that's really important to remember and to keep the web more privacy focused and more secure. Because whenever you ask the user for permission, you're potentially helping, or you're allowing them to leak private information. I know I'm over, so apologies but give me 1 or 2 more seconds here. There's work going on something called content security policy, which is an HTTP header that can help reduce cross-site scripting attacks. There's something called privileged context, which we're working on, which is used to be called powerful features, and the idea is to make powerful features HTTPS only. So whenever you have a feature that allows access to sensitive data, that allows access to sensor data from your phone, like your microphone or even a temperature sensor or something like that, that has access about what other devices are around you, such as a Bluetooth API, a feature that has persistent identifiers in it, that introduces some notion of state between sessions. Service worker is an example of that. Something like full screen, which when enacted, you could actually trick the user into thinking that they're interacting with the system. All of these things should require HTTPS all the time, and not only because of the encryption, but because then you know who you're talking to. You know it's an authenticated, secure connection, and you know who is providing you that code. That's kind of important as well. I just wanted to mention HTTP2. How many people in the room are familiar with HTTP2? You really need to become familiar with HTTP2. HTTP2 is here. If you're a web developer, you need to know about it. You're already using it if you use Google Chrome, because or Firefox, that is, because every Google service now is being published in HTTP2. And if you're a web developer, you need to get under the covers of it. That's a whole other presentation, but there is an explainer there, and there's a lot of information. I'd be happy to talk more about that in the break. But importantly, and the reason I put it up here is because the browser manufacturers have said that they will not support the unencrypted version of HTTP2. So in order to have HTTP2 and all the benefits, including all the performance benefits, you're going to have to move to HTTPS to get that. And a lot of that is actually not just about privacy, it's about pragmatism, because HTTPS has the great quality of that it can punch directly through intermediary boxes. It can punch through proxies. And most proxies in the web don't and won't understand HTTP2. So the only way to effectively and reliably deploy HTTP2 is actually over HTTPS. Okay, 2 more slides. So, one does, whatever, not simply encrypt the web, right? I love this guy. Anyway, actually this is my last slide. So it's just to make the point, there's a lot of work here, and there's a lot of work going on in the web standards community, both W3C, IETF. There's also a lot of work happening in the browser makers themselves that are innovating and trying to. And it's not just I mentioned Chrome and Mozilla guys, but the Internet Explorer guys with their new Edge browser are making a lot of inroads on this as well. And even Apple on Safari, normally silent, has been talking a lot about implementing Speedy and moving towards more secure services. So there's a lot of work, and there's a lot of work for web developers if you want to take advantage of these technologies and if you want to move to HTTPS. But it's worth it, much like the journey to Mordor. So thanks very much, and like I say, I don't think we have time for questions, but maybe, this is my obligatory XKCD as well. I'm on Torgo. You can follow me on Torgo, W3C Tag for the tag group that I co-chair, and TEP Digital, my lovely employer. Thank you.